Imagine waking up one day and finding out that your thoughts, your opinions were illegal. Not because you did anything that harmed anyone, but because someone decided your ideas were dangerous or hateful. Everyone agrees that hate is wrong, but here's the danger. When the government gets to define what hate is, then suddenly everything can be considered hate. Welcome to Reclaiming Dominion, where we talk about restoring godly order in our homes, churches, and nations. Today, we are discussing the recent bill C-9 being presented in Canadian Parliament and how we as Christians should think about the subject of hate speech. So here's an overview of what Bill C-9 accomplishes. It increases policing of what they consider hate speech, which is already in the Criminal Code of Canada, but it also broadens the scope of what is considered hate speech. And it increases penalties for those who are found guilty of committing a crime within these parameters. Now, first off, before we can even discuss this bill, I want to give you a backdrop for how we should approach any new bills or laws that come out from our parliament, or if you're in the United States or any other country, your Congress, or those who make the laws in your land. It's important to put in the proper perspective what their job is. And according to the Bible, Romans 13, we actually see that the purpose of human government is to punish the evildoers. Their main job is to make sure criminals get punished for what they do wrong, and it is also to protect the citizens by extension in its own country. This is why nations have police forces, this is why they have justice systems, and it's also why they have militaries to protect its citizens from any outside invaders who would seek to subjugate the citizens of that country. The government's job is primarily to punish those evildoers, as Romans 13 highlights. It is not the job of the government to define what morality is. So what do you think? How far do you think the government should go at enforcing laws and creating laws for the protection of its citizens? So if the government isn't qualified to determine what morality is, then the question stands, well, who gets to determine what morality is? Here's the thing, as human beings, we all have a baseline understanding of right and wrong. It differs a little bit from person to person, but basically, we all understand generally that it's wrong to murder people, it's wrong to steal a person's wife, it's wrong to lie, it's wrong to steal. We basically have this understanding of society what morality is. But where does that come from and who gets to define it? You see, there has to be a source beyond us as humans that defines our morality, and we call this a transcendent source. As Christians, we understand that it is God who made the world, and that we all are submitted in His creation under His laws. You see, if God made the world, He has the rights to exactly how the world operates. He's designed it, not randomly, but He's designed it in such a way that it operates according to His plan and His purposes. So all of the rules that God has given that are written on our hearts, they're there on purpose by God. And we don't get to determine what those are. We just get to discover them and we get to fight for them. And this is really what the quest for freedom is. Freedom isn't about me doing whatever I feel like and whatever I want. That's not true freedom. Actually, as Christians, we understand that that is bondage and slavery to our own flesh. But true freedom is being free to do exactly what God has made us to do. So our pursuit as human beings is to discover what is good, what is right, what is beautiful. And then we get to pursue that. And when we get to do that, that is considered freedom. God is the one who's the source, who gets to decide what morality is, what good is, and what evil is. He defines it and we get to follow it. When humans get involved in the process, we end up twisting the morality that God has set forth. We call good things evil and we call evil good. And this messes everything up. If human governments are given the power to be able to determine what is right and wrong, then inevitably they will fail. They will mess up and they will start enforcing rules that are not just and that are not fair. And they will neglect things that they ought to have done. Because human governments are fallible. However, God is not fallible. And so when we trust in God, when we follow His laws and His rules, we know we are on safe ground. Now, part of the problem with this Bill C-9 is it operates on a basis of definitions of words. And it also changes those definitions of words. Now, this bill presents a change in the terms of some of the words in Canadian law in the past. And particularly, it gets us thinking one thing about hate, but it interprets it in a slightly different way. Bill C-9 says, the definition would specify that hatred involves detestation or vilification and does not mean disdain or dislike. The bill further specifies that the communication of a statement does not incite or promote hatred solely because it discredits, humiliates, hurts, or offends. Did you catch that? The wording of this bill, it has changed so that The criminal code in Canada, which currently prosecutes for hate speech, has broadened the scope of the definition of hate speech beyond just what you say, but it can even include things that you think. It goes beyond things that you would say that would humiliate somebody, but just the intentions of your actions are actually called into question here. This is broadened scope beyond just what you say, but actually what you think and what your worldview is. If the government decides that your worldview, the way that you look at the world, is not a good worldview and that it is a hateful one, then they can actually prosecute you based on what they believe you believe. Having broad definitions like this open the door for abuse. Does this mean that the Canadian rule of law is going to be for sure used in evil purposes? Not necessarily. But what we do know is there are evil people in the world, and they will use whatever means they can. And the way this is worded, it is definitely giving open ground for people to use this in evil ways to harm people that hold different opinions from them and opinions which they don't like. Now, another part of the problem with this bill is how intense the repercussions are for those who would break the law in this new criminal code amendment. The punishment for committing what they consider a hate speech has actually increased. And I quote from Bill C-9, it says, if prosecuted by way of indictment, the maximum punishment would range from up to 5 years, 10 years, 14 years, or life imprisonment. Now, this is an awfully steep punishment for the crime of hate speech, particularly when it can be interpreted as just a worldview or something that you think. And here's our problem. Most likely they're not going to enforce these life sentence terms, but they're there to scare you. They're there to scare the average person from speaking up. This is the harm of bills such as this, is it gets the average person to think twice before they would speak or dissent or share an opinion that they think might be considered against the culture, against the grain. This is very bad because in a free society, we need open dialogue. We need differences of opinion. We need to be able to come and share things that might even be interpreted as not the most charitable or not the nicest, because we need this ground where we can openly dialogue and disagree with each other. But this bill will actively suppress the freedom of expression. People are going to think twice before they speak out an unpopular opinion. If the government has labeled something as hateful, then people are not going to want to challenge the things the government says. It gives too much authority to the government to define morality and to define our speech. This whole subject of hate speech, it treads dangerously into the territory of what G.K. Chesterton calls good virtues gone rogue. He actually says in his book on orthodoxy, the modern world is full of wild and wasted virtues. When a religious scheme is shattered, it is not merely the vices that are let loose, but the virtues are let loose also. And the virtues wander more wildly, and the virtues do more terrible damage. The modern world is full of the old Christian virtues gone mad. The virtues have gone mad because they have been isolated from each other and are wandering alone. You see, what G.K. Chesterton is revealing to us is that even good things, even virtues, can be weaponized against the truth. One isolated virtue taken away from all other virtues can result in harm. Take compassion, for example. If you take compassion, but don't connect truth with it, what you end up is enabling harmful behavior. Or take equality. It's a good thing, right? Yes, but equality without justice just leads to forced conformity. Or take tolerance. Tolerance without discernment, it just leads to moral blindness. See, any good thing, any good virtue, if it's divorced from its context of all other virtues in God's moral code, they can be used dangerously. Now, only God can define love and hatred appropriately. Whenever humans try to do this, we inevitably mess it up. When the government tries to redefine morality and take that authority into their own hands, it inevitably punishes the righteous and rewards the wicked. Evil will always exist in a fallen world. No law can erase hatred from the human heart. But a government that claims the power to eliminate hate often suppresses truth, and it will create a world that is far worse than the one that it sought to fix.